Hey folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're talking about scales. And I've been on YouTube for a number of years, made a bunch of lessons and mentioned a number of fancy scale names, but I've never really gone into detail about how I view or organize scales on the guitar. So this will be a multi-part series with each one getting a little bit more advanced. And this video will focus on scale and interval fundamentals to lay a solid foundation for everything to come later on. I'm going to show you 3 scale-related things to work on that will help you get comfortable with the idea of playing scales. I will talk about some basic scales, but the idea behind learning those is really just to get familiar with the fretboard and understand how intervals work on the guitar and get used to playing things in a linear fashion. So after that, when you're ready to move on to the standard sets of positions and various boxes all over the neck, it won't seem as overwhelming. We're going to start off talking about open position, and this is the first of the 3 things to work on, just learning all your notes in the open position, which is this area of the guitar, lower on the neck, using the open strings and the first 3 or 4 frets, all of these notes. And this is something I teach to all my beginner private students. I have my own set of exercises, just going string by string. Just going one by one, learning the notes, playing easy songs, starting with the natural notes, slowly introducing accidentals down the road, etc. That's my kind of beginner, material. And I think this is an essential component of learning guitar, especially as a beginner, and if you want to reach a certain level of proficiency in the future, obviously you gotta start with the basics. Even if you're just playing for fun, it's still good to learn. I mean, there's only so much you can do without actually, learning and absorbing something. The thing is, most students pick this up pretty easily and actually enjoy playing the notes. The chords, rhythm and strumming, are actually the tough part of learning guitar as a beginner, and those usually take a lot more time and practice. But while my students work on the chords and the strumming, they usually enjoy playing the notes and these fun little songs and exercises in the meantime. Also, the notes are good to know because you're eventually going to run into a song that mixes some chords and single note phrases. So, learn those notes ahead of time and be ready. Now, I've also had a number of students come to me after a few years of playing, maybe studying with another teacher or being self-taught, and they never learned the notes of open position and they're kind of stuck. They want to advance to another level, but they don't know what to do. And with that foundation missing, it's really you run into that situation, at a certain point after enough playing. So I simply tell them to learn the open position, and I don't necessarily treat them like beginners and, hold their hand and teach it to them directly unless they want me to go through all the basics, step by step. But instead, if they're at a certain level, if they're familiar enough and able to play, fairly well, I recommend they just take a week or 2 and practice/memorize it on their own. And I say use anything, you can use my exercises or other books, whatever you find online. Any resources are fine. Just get it done and you'll be set, for the rest of your life, hopefully, and you can begin learning the rest of the fretboard and break that plateau. And that is basically my message in this video, to learn the open position if you haven't already, since this video, Intro to Scales, is likely going to appeal to those intermediate or beginner plus category players, looking to get introduced to scales. Now, whatever method you use to learn the open position, whether it's playing exercises, reading music or tabs, or just straight memorization somehow, in addition to that work, there are a number of actual scales located in open position that you can start to work on. And of course, these can help with the learning/memorization process as well. Some easy scales might be like a C scale, starting on C right here on the 5th string, 3rd fret, and you can get 1 octave in there, and if you want to continue the rest, that would be the rest in open position, and then if you really want, you can shift up to get that 2nd octave, So that's a perfectly legitimate C major scale using open position plus a little extra if you want. But, that's, if you're learning all the natural notes in open position, you're going to come across that anyway, when you play the notes in order. So all you got to do, is just start right there on C and play all those natural notes until you hit another C, and you've got a C major scale. A couple other easy scales in open position are F and G. F with just 1 flat, the B flat, and G with just 1 sharp, the F sharp. Both of those scales still use basically all your open position notes, all the natural notes, just altered with 1 accidental each. And they both fit conveniently, perfectly in open position. So if I go F, 1st fret of my low E string, still making great use of those open strings, So there we go, 2 octaves fitting nicely in my open position. And then G, one step higher, it's going to sound like this. So 3rd fret of the lowest string. This one, you got to reach up to the 4th fret, get that F sharp, and then you're good to go. So there we go. Again, making great use of all those open strings. Again, very practical scales to know, and a great place to start, for your first scale shapes. If you're up for some slightly tougher scales in open position, you might want to try something like E. So that's going to use 4 sharps and, not quite as many open strings, but since we have our lowest string and highest string being E, it's a guitar-friendly key, it still, sounds pretty good and I think works in open position. So again, starting with that lowest string, hitting all these sharps, we get the open A string, a couple more. Hit that open B string, a couple more sharps, and end on the E there. And then okay, so there we go. You could also try A, 3 sharps, still making pretty good use of all those open strings. Plus we have our nice starting point of that open A string, so go through it quickly. Let me try that again using an open string here. So we got, trying to use as many open strings as possible. And I'll reach up 1 more fret there to catch that high A in the 2nd octave. So. All right, so there we go. There's A. And then a couple others. You might even want to try B flat. I know flat keys in guitar are a little bit scary, but this one, if you start right here, 1st fret of your A string, still get some good use of all these open strings. And we're going to shift up there to catch those last few notes. And here we go. Down one more open string. So there we go. And then the last one, maybe a little bit of a stretch, but perhaps you can try D. Use that nice open D string. 2 sharps still. Making good use of those open strings, then you do eventually run out of space, but you can shift up kind of like we did for C and complete the 2 octaves. There we go. So those are all the scales in open position that incorporate the open strings. And that's the idea right now. Later on when you start to work on positions all around the neck, the idea is to fret every note and not use the open strings so those shapes can be movable. And you may even find that when you're, getting used to those other positions and boxes where there are no open strings, when you come down to play an open position, it can be a little bit tricky, because if you're used to fretting every note, you have a certain timing and sync to your hands. When you come down to the open position, you take that away. So, get a little practice ahead of time, and, it might help you down the road. All right, this wouldn't be a proper intro to scales if we didn't discuss the formula for a major scale. When we talk about scales, we're usually referring to notes that move in intervals of seconds. So if I use the letter names of the notes, it would just go in alphabetical order. So A to B to C to D, etc. As a side note, chords or arpeggios are usually built in thirds. So you would skip every other note. So A, skip B, go to C, skip D to E, and so on, stacking thirds like that. Another way to describe moving in intervals of seconds is moving by step. One step after another, one step at a time, not skipping any notes, etc. When it comes to steps, we have whole steps and half steps. And every scale is a combination of these whole steps and half steps, and sometimes even a step and a half or an augmented second. But for the major scale, we only use whole steps and half steps. So the order of the steps, or the formula of the major scale, is as follows. So from your starting point, you have a whole step, then a half step, then whole step, whole step, whole step, and then one more half step. So whole, half, whole, half. And if I start on C, using the C major scale, all the natural letters, C to D is a whole step, D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step, F to G, whole step, G to A, whole step, A to B, whole step, and then B to C is one more half step. So you may wonder, how do I know which intervals are whole steps versus half steps? And for that, you just have to understand that in Western music, we use equal tempered tuning, where there are 12 equal tones within one octave. And if you think about the keys on a piano, you probably know there are white keys and black keys. The 7 white keys, the natural notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or the alphabet. And then there are 5 black keys, the sharps and or flats. And when you move up one key at a time, that's moving by a half step. So if I play the C major scale and I move from C to D, there's a note in between. That black key is in between C and D. So if I move from C to the black key, that's a half step. If I move from C, skipping the black key, to D, that's a whole step. All right, same thing from D to E. We got another black key in there. So from D, I skip the black key, I move to E, and that's a whole step. So far we have 2 whole steps. Then when I move from E to F, you'll notice there's no black key in there, so that is a half step. So whole, whole, half, and then as I said before, we have whole, 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 half. The other half step being from B to C. Again, you can see there's no black key in between those 2 notes. So looking at the C major scale on the piano, it's pretty obvious to see, you know, where the whole steps and half steps are. But the thing is, you can take the formula of the major scale and start on any note, and as long as I play the order of the whole steps and the half steps, I get a major scale. And it's perfectly okay if you don't play piano, you don't need to know much about it. I just think it's a clear visual representation of these whole steps and half steps. All right, how do we apply this to the guitar? Well, if you think about the notes you already know, perhaps in open position, you may notice, for example, if I take like the C, 1st fret B string, and I play from C to D, on the 3rd fret of the B string, I skip the 2nd fret, so 1st fret to 2nd fret, and just like on the piano, we have C and D, and then there's that black key in the middle. Well, the 2nd fret is that black key. That's the C sharp or the D flat. And the principle to know here is that each fret on the guitar is a half step. So if I move up from C, if I move up 1 fret, I get a half step. If I move up 2 frets, I get a whole step. Okay? Everywhere on the guitar, that's the way it works. And so that's, you know, easy to visualize. I can count, you know, count 1 fret, count 2 frets, that's cool. The confusion hits when you start to change strings. It's often difficult to comprehend intervals or a sequence of intervals across multiple strings. So even when I'm playing these scales we talked about in the first part, you know, when I'm hitting those open strings and changing those strings, you know, I'm not, it's just, it's not quite, you know, laid out in a line, and it is just a little tougher to process, you know, aside from the fact if you're a beginner or, you know, just starting to learn scales, you're probably not going to think about the intervals right away. But one way I like to introduce this concept to students, and this is the second out of the 3 things to work on. It was a long time getting here, but here we are. And the thing is to play scales on a single string up the neck. So we don't change strings at all. We eliminate that confusion. And here's how this goes. So back to the C on the B string. And again, 2 frets is a whole step, 1 fret is a half step. That's all you got to know. And I like to joke with people that you only need 1 finger for this. So you can play from C and move up 2 frets. You get a whole step, you go to D, and we're just following that major scale formula of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So from C to D, whole step, then half step, and then whole step, whole step, whole step, and then half step. Okay, and then backwards, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. And there you have a scale on 1 string laid out so that you can actually see the whole steps and the half steps, kind of like a piano, you know. There's no arguing whether, yep, that's a half step, 1 fret, you know, that's a fact. 2 frets, that's a fact, that's a whole step. Okay? And as I said before, you can start on any note and plug in that formula, and you're going to get a major scale. So I started on C right here. Well, how about I start on F, 1st fret of the E string. So again, just plug in the formula of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, etc., back down. You know, let's pick one more note. How about something like A? here on the G string at the 2nd fret. So we go up a whole step, up a whole step, up a half step, up a whole step, up a whole step, up a whole step, up a half step, and then down a half, down a whole, down a whole, down a whole, down a half, down a whole, and down a whole step. And there's a perfectly valid A major scale. And you know, the thing is, right off the bat, I tell people don't even worry about like memorizing the notes at first. Don't worry about the notes you're playing. Just get the formula down and get the sound of a major scale, you know, in your head. Eventually, you do want to learn the notes, and this is going to be a good way to help you, you know, count the notes up the neck. So, you know, we're learning the open position. We're kind of learning this way, you know, across the neck. Now we're going to learn notes this way up the neck, you know, little by little, starting with scales that you're familiar with, and then, you know, applying this technique to every key eventually. And it may not seem like it at first, but this is actually a very practical way to play scales in regular music. Now, it's not going to be your go-to method for playing super fast or fancy licks, but for playing, you know, melodic passages, you'll find a lot of, you know, very good guitar players will kind of, you know, keep as much of a melody on one string as possible. You know, to keep the same timbre, you know, of that string, or at least, you know, have less of a change. You know, if I keep every note on one string, it's all pretty similar. If I change strings, it's a little more noticeable. You know, that it gets a little fatter, and you know, it's just subtle details like that can elevate your playing. Plus, you know, we can do cool little. You know, you can slide, you can hammer on, pull off, do fun stuff, little ornament, and have some fun like that. People might get a kick out of that. And then to take this idea to the next level, what you can do is combine strings, maybe two adjacent strings. So, for example, if I play a G scale, starting right here, high E string, 3rd fret, and I just plug in that formula, whole, half, whole, half. I get my G scale, I practice that, you know, I start to learn the notes little by little, get it comfortable, play it various ways, and there's my G scale. Well, you know, maybe I'm starting to play on the B string, and if I find another G, like right here at the 8th fret, plug in that same formula, you know, just figure it out, whole, half, and then etc. Whole, half. Well, there's two, you know, the exact same scale in two different spots, but, you know, maybe I don't want to play up this high, so I could start a G scale there, and then I know I have another one over here, so I just trade off, you know. Here's my C, same pitch. Well, the next note would be D, and there I have, you know, kind of like a two-part scale, 4 notes on one string, 4 notes on the next. And you know, that's a good way to, again, we're talking about playing up the neck and across the neck, and we're combining those two ideas. You could go a step further. You could try 3 strings, find another G. There we go. And I go, you know, whole step, half step, etc. You know, I'm going to run out of space there eventually, but again, I practiced the G scale on my 1st string, my high E string. I practiced the G scale, you know, on my B string, and now I'm kind of familiar with that area of the guitar. So I got, you know, whole step, and then I know I can change strings here because I practiced this part. So there's my half step, whole step, etc., etc. And basically, what you get is kind of almost, you know, getting into the box territory. You know, or playing completely fretted notes completely across the neck. But that's just another way to get there, and you know, experiment and come up with ways to, you know, come up with different ways to view it. But playing the scales up the neck like this are a great way to what I call fill in the gaps. And you do that just by learning notes little by little, trying to memorize, like a couple scales a day or something like that, however you want to approach it. But, it's easy to count those whole steps and half steps, easy to count those scales up and down the neck. And it's just a great, learning tool, to, again, fill in those gaps that may be missing in your fretboard mastery. The third thing to work on is pentatonic scales. I know it seems like kind of a layup, but pentatonic scales are very guitar friendly and a good starter scale for most people. There are only 5 notes, and all the box positions have 2 notes per string, which is easier to remember than a typical 7-note scale with varying notes on each string. And once you know a couple of the boxes, they're a good vehicle to break out of open position and move your hands around the fretboard. Also, pentatonics are only 2 notes away from a major scale. So all the positions, all the pentatonic positions, are very similar to 7-note scale positions you'll eventually learn down the road. There will be a lot of overlap, so if I play like good old A minor pentatonic, relative major, C major pentatonic, well, I got my 5 pentatonic notes, and if I want to throw in, those extra notes, all I got to do is, find them. Etc., etc. And again, I'm basically playing a scale there, or drawing from a scale, just thinking about the pentatonic and just simply adding in 2 more notes. There are 5 different pentatonic positions, and I recommend learning all of them eventually. They're pretty easy to transpose, so try them in different keys, and maybe start off with one position in one key, move it around a little bit, then add in like another position and another key every week or so until you're comfortable with everything. And of course, they're fun to play. You may be interested in any number of guitar solos or riffs that utilize pentatonics, so they're immediately applicable in pretty much any style of music. And beyond memorizing the boxes and learning solos, the way you practice them is up to you. You may want to try some repetitive patterns like groups of 4 or 6. If I start, it's like 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, then like move up a note, something like that, descending. Or you can go keep it simple, just go like 1, 2, 3, 4, change strings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or like a group of 6, 2 notes per string across 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Descending, descending, etc. There's a lot of ways, a lot of patterns to discover, but this is honestly, I can go into an entirely other video with this topic, but do some experimenting and exploring on your own, and just have some fun with your pentatonics. You really can't go too wrong. This concludes my intro to scales. I hope you found it helpful and feel ready to practice the things I talked about in this video to prepare for the jump into the next phase, which is full 7-note positions all over the neck. If you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you could hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. If this really piqued your interest and you enjoy my style of teaching, I do offer private lessons online, so feel free to inquire through the links in the description. Check out some of the tabs available for sale on my website, and please consider supporting me on Patreon, where I offer exclusive bonus content such as lessons and tabs. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.